Yes, we are. Hello, everyone. Welcome to AOA UK Monthly Transit Podcast. Today with me is Monday and Marcus. How are you guys? I know it's early morning for you.
Oh, good, good.
9 o'clock Friday on a wet Friday morning. It's lovely to be here
Yeah. I
Yeah.
know, I know. It's a slightly
indoors.
unusual, it's slightly unusual time because, well, unfortunately, because I am in Asia side. So if we're going to run our podcast on the usual time, that would be for me, it's like 3 a.m. Then I will just like totally unable to
No,
respond. But thank you guys, you adopted, and let's do it in the morning. Thank you so much. But we have very interesting new moon, isn't it, Monday? And Marcus, it's like before we start, we just like we couldn't stop to comment the news we read at this moment. From I think because on the Monday I run a podcast with Monday on the Instagram, and we already talked about tiny bit about the what we hear about the Chinese AI called Deep Seek. Very interesting. Deep Seek
mm,
are shaking the whole Western world, especially in the Silicon Valley in the United States, including Meta, including OpenAI. They were so scared because this Chinese company declared that they only use maybe like 30% of cost of what OpenAI is spending. They only use 30% of those costs to train a better AI than the OpenAI. So everyone was like, how could this happen? And also people were quite excited thinking about, oh, Silicon Valley, your tech broad finally get punishment because the Nasdaq was a 3% on that day after the news comes out. But after couple day after now, everything's cooling down. People has time to re-examine all the data, all the things they declare. Seems like, well, there is some doubt there. I don't want to say they lie or something, but there is a lot of doubt at this moment how they get chips to train the great AI. Some resources reveal the reason they said that because those high-end chips was banned in China. They smuggle them in through another country, so they are not allowed to say we have those high-end chips.
mm.
They are not allowed to say. That's why they say we don't. We use the super cheap low-end
so
chips
so
to train.
all is not as it seems, basically. But which
You,
which
you,
but I just have a question for you guys, because you've thought about this a little bit. Did this news come out when Mercury was conjoined with Pluto? Or
yes, it's
yes.
very close. Yes, yes.
Okay.
The
and
Mercury
and
was.
and yeah, and also under the new moon in
Yes.
Aquarius at 10.5 degrees Aquarius, we had a new moon, which was as we know, in a wide conjunction with Pluto, that underhand doing things
Yeah.
in the dark,
100%.
subterfuge, and yeah, and obviously Aquarius, the sign of Aquarius is associated with technology as well, and certainly along with Uranus associated with AI, artificial
Right.
intelligence, the air sign of Aquarius. And like you, Marcus, even though I'm not so much of a traditionalist, I do associate Aquarius as a ruler with Saturn rather
Yeah.
than Uranus. But Uranus is also associated with technology, and it is the great disruptor. And we also have Uranus just gone direct. It's
Ah,
stations today, and then it goes direct, I think, tomorrow. And
okay.
that intensity, you're going to see you're going to get surprises, you're going to get shocks, you're going to get, I think we spoke, Rod, you spoke about your conversation with Christine Skinner and how the astrology is reflecting the movements in the financial markets, didn't you? And
Yeah,
so that
yes.
has a lot to do with it. It's not just the
I
tech,
mean,
it's financial markets.
I love that, Mandy. If we go by Sue Tompkins' old two-word technique, with
Mhm.
planets, this Uranus stationing direct or stationing retrograde, either way, would be technological reversals. Do you know what I mean?
Ah,
Yeah.
brilliant.
Yeah. Amazing.
Or
Yeah.
technological surprises, or I don't know, whatever. But
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, but at least the basic meaning is staring, focus on. Everyone was looking on the AI and how could this happen? And it's a lot of question, but but it's like some people are quite happy. They say, "Well, we have a better solution and cheaper."
all is
Well, I
not as
hope
it
so.
seems. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Well, and Mandy,
Should we
I was
have a
going
look
to
at the
say,
chart, guys, before we just
yeah.
let's get the
yeah.
chart up,
Okay.
and then we can
Let me
talk
put chap
about the
on,
chart
and
as
then we
we're.
can continue. Mandy, you can
So that,
continue.
if
Let
I'm
me put the
correct, that
chat on.
new moon was in Aquarius was also trine Jupiter in Gemini, which is round about, we'll see in the chart, around about 10, 11 degrees at the moment. So trine Jupiter, Jupiter in Gemini, the news, the media, um, it's all about what's the word I'm looking for? Commerce as well. And of course, Jupiter expands whatever it touches. It makes it seem bigger. It makes everything seem bigger. So, like you said, Rod, that this complete dip in the market in terms of American AI, but you said it started now, it's in massive and big and a huge crisis, and now it started to level out again. Is that correct?
Yes. People thinking, oh, okay, now we understand things are not what they say, and so they are more reassured. They are more
Mm.
reassured because in the beginning it's like a huge surprise. How can they do that? Why the Americans spend a lot of money they couldn't achieve that, but the Chinese only spend only 1/3 cost and can achieve such great performing. But now the Silicon Valley are more reassured, say, okay, it's okay. They didn't invent it. They didn't get help from aliens or something.
Aliens.
That's
Yeah,
great.
but that's possible. Well, another news, I mean, it's a sad news yesterday. Um, was the one airplane, American airplane crash collide with a U.S. Military helicopter and in Washington airport. Just right before the airplane landed, it crashed into each other. And then I think the 60 passenger and the 4 crew, no one survived.
Oh
And
wow.
that was a really shocking. Even more shocking, I think Monday mentioned that is even before they know the reason, American President Trump already know what caused this collide. Monday.
Well, thinks he knows.
He think he knows. Could you tell us?
Yeah, news followers will have seen this. It's on in the news this morning as you wake up, or you'd watch it last night. But I think he did a live speech to the American people, basically saying that the reason, without any correction,
Evidence.
that the reason for the crash was federal diversity policies, i.e., that the wrong kind of people intellectually and mentally were being hired into the job of air traffic controller. Now, for a little bit of context on that, on ITV News this morning in the UK, there was an aviation expert saying that I think it's internationally, but certainly US based and UK based, those diversity policies don't apply to air traffic control because it's such a highly qualified, highly trained, highly stressful job. And of those people that make it through the recruitment process, which is minuscule, there's also a minuscule amount of people actually manage to get through the training program. So yeah,
I mean,
make of that
I'm
what you
shocked.
will.
Honestly, Mandy, I'm shocked. I can't believe that somebody as robustly truth telling as Donald Trump would have made something like that up. I mean,
I know.
I'm so shocked.
I know. Well, that's a Uranus shock, isn't it?
Yes,
Uranus.
indeed.
Uranus, also
I mean,
Aquarius.
he's not historically he's not backwards in coming forwards with his opinions, and let's put this tactfully, presenting truths in lieu of fact has been a bit of a Trumpian signature in the past. And in his chart he does have that sort of, I think it's his Mercury in the 12th in a square with Jupiter in the third with Neptune. There's some like Mercury, Jupiter, Neptune stuff going from the 12th to his third house in his birth chart. So, I mean, that's a signature for him. But I mean, just what do you because I had a couple of thoughts with this new moon in terms of that. I mean, the first one was just like both of the themes we've talked about, both the plane crash and the AI thing fit with the Mercury Pluto at the new moon, don't they? It's sort of like all those deep issues with technology problems coming up and stuff about that Mercury in an air sign could be to do with travel and transport and communication and tech and issues to do with those things being dug up by Pluto, and Pluto of course being associated with death and blah 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 and all that. But then I was wondering what else, because I mean obviously this is a really, on the face of it, I think this looks like a really decent new moon because we've got the whole new moon is in trine to Jupiter, right? In Gemini.
Jupiter, yes.
It's just that Jupiter is retrograde and not in great shape, perhaps, but still that would give us a sense of optimism or whatever. So where do you guys think the source of the issues is in this particular new moon?
Like, I'm going to sound like a politician because I'm not going to answer your question directly, but I just had a related thought I shall share before it floats off into the ether. With that Mercury and Pluto in Aquarius speaks to me of speaking truth to power.
Yep.
And that isn't really happening at the moment. And if we look to another big aspect in the sky, which is Mars in Cancer retrograde, as you said in our pre-discussion, it's in its fall, it's out of bounds, which means it's doing more of itself in perhaps not in a good way. It's a difficult sign, particularly when it's retrograde, as well as being in Cancer, which is the sign of its fall, as you said earlier, Marcus, that it's not being able, it's somehow frustrated. That Mars is incredibly frustrated. So when we talk about truth to power, even though there's not an aspect between this Mercury, Pluto, and this Mars, the chart always tries to synthesize itself. So there's a frustration of being able to assert oneself, to be able to actually have the courage to assert oneself and to be in kind of a defensive mode. And we're seeing this where politicians and premiers and leaders across the globe who have spoken against Trump and the way he does things, they have had to really go with it, to make friends with him, to because of trade, because of international relations. And we've seen that as well in the technological, I hate the word tech bros, but these tech CEOs, let's call them that. It makes them sound cool and cooler than they are. But these tech CEOs, these tech owners, these big billionaires, who many of them didn't have a good word to say about Trump. Suddenly they're almost in the front row of his inauguration. So I just wanted to sort of make that point. Sorry, I didn't answer your question directly, but I thought
no, those are great, but they're great points, Mandy. Like, and yeah, they're great points. And you sort of did actually, because I do think that the Mars currently, it has a lot to do with a lot of the stuff that's going on. Maybe not specifically the air traffic control or the AI thing, but like, because cancer is often associated with one's clan or tribe, right? So a lot of the misdirected people's frustrations, I would argue, are being misdirected in sort of like, it's sort of like dysfunctional patriotism, which is, you know, a lot of the, you know, there's a broader pattern that we'll talk about as well. That's, you know, the whole social stuff for these years at the moment are at work. But right now, I think that Mars in Cancer is just, as you said, Mandy, it's sort of stirring up trouble, but it's kind of like misdirected frustration, and it's coming out as sort of nationalism or our tribe versus their tribe kind of stuff, which can be, you know, a dysfunctional Mars in Cancer thing. I say it's dysfunctional because obviously it's in fall, it's out of bounds, as you mentioned, and it's retrograde, so it's like literally going the wrong way. So yeah, I think that has something to do with it. But then the other point I don't know, because you mentioned earlier when we were talking, Mandy, about Pluto just being so we were going to do a little tie in there, because from a traditional point of view, I think we're still very much under this Saturn Jupiter square, which is obviously separate. No, it's not exact now, but it's coming back in. I don't think it'll be exact
Yes.
again until both of them shift sign later this year. But what's interesting about that is the Jupiter Saturn conjunction operates in 20-year cycles. And the last one in 2020 was highly significant because it initiated a period of the next 120 years where they're happening in air signs. So that air signs relate to sort of tech and transport, because it's air. So tech, transport, culture, the way we think, human behavior, because air signs are all human signs.
Civilized.
Yes, exactly. The nature of civilization, totally. And I think what's interesting about that happening in Saturn, in Aquarius, which is ruled by Saturn in 2020, and we talked about this a fair bit at the time, was that means it's the Saturn dominant period. So that can be for better and for worse. And obviously Saturn has some fairly nasty sides, which is sort of like oppressing. The nasty side of Saturn in Aquarius could be oppressing individuality, the opposition to Leo and the Sun, or sort of like leveling everybody and sort of homogenizing. But the positive side could be greater egalitarianism. And you could see both those things coming. Anyway, the point is we're at the square point after that conjunction. A lot of the inherent tensions that may have been seeded are coming out now. And we can see this in terms of a lot of the stuff that's going on around the world economically is probably the fallout of post-COVID economic, the results of like just all the lockdowns and stuff that were going on during that period have now had this economic fallout, which is causing all this sociocultural fallout because the repercussions are affecting world economies. You've got like all of this nationalism and sort of like, anti-immigrant fervor that's being whipped up is very much that, I think, that Jupiter Saturn stuff. So yeah, it's a culturally tense moment relating back to that, I think, conjunction in Aquarius 4 years ago. And then I think you, Mandy, what you mentioned, the Pluto in Aquarius, the other piece of this is relevant probably on a broader scale.
Pluto, of course,
Mandy, could you tell us?
Yeah, Pluto is, of course, at the beginning of Aquarius, and right where this 2020 conjunction of Jupiter Saturn started in that square, as you rightly said. It's that first big crisis point of getting on track or choosing your direction. It's squares are always very active, and they ask you to do something with them. They show you things. And when I say show you things, Pluto, we think of Pluto dark, deep, underworld, you can't see what's going on, but Pluto's sign that it's transiting shows us the shadow aspect of the sign that it's in. So we're seeing the shadow aspect of diversity, of inclusivity. We've already spoken about what Trump said about the air traffic controllers and what he believes is or I don't know whether he actually ever believes what he says, but what he was saying was without any thorough investigation or evidence that the diversity policies had something to do with the terrible crash that has happened in the last sort of 48 hours in America, in Washington, and of course the other thing about Aquarius, it is about diversity, inclusivity. It's about doing things differently, and we're seeing the shadow side of that, and we're seeing what the powerful people, the powerful energies in the world, what they are capable of doing. And it hasn't so far been great, because again, I was reading an article this morning in I think it was either The Guardian or the BBC website, I can't remember which one. I read both of them in the morning amongst others, and it was saying that already in America, trans women who are in prison are being put into isolation. In some cases, there's some anecdotal evidence that their hormone treatments are being stopped, and they're being told that they might go to men's prisons, where a trans woman in a male prison is, I think it was something like 19 times more likely to be assaulted sexually or otherwise. So it's showing us the real shadow side. It's showing us what power can do. I don't want to make any kind of analysis or judgment of that, but just to put that out there, something for us to see what we're looking at, because I think it's very depending on, your views or what you think or what you feel, it's very easy to feel utterly horrified, and perhaps that's the right reaction. For me, it feels like the right reaction. But also we have to remember Pluto shows us the shadow side. And why is it showing us? I feel it's showing us so that we can do something about it, so that we can change it.
I love that, Mandy, and maybe that is the trine of this new moon to the retrograde Jupiter and Gemini. I mean, Jupiter and Gemini is it's not in a happy place in Gemini. It's kind of in its detriment, and it's retrograde. It's moving backwards. But this is kind of like something about what's happening this month is going to beneficially illuminate some social dysfunctions, something along those lines, because Jupiter helps create greater understandings. In Gemini, it'll also create endless discussions and possibilities, but it's going to create greater understandings. And I think the social dysfunction here is maybe the fact that both the Sun is in detriment in Aquarius and Jupiter is in detriment in Gemini. So there's a sense of one of the traditional descriptions of a planet in detriment is like a person fighting with themselves. So, but this is still a trine between Sun. So I totally agree, Mandy. This is like what's coming up now, particularly this month, might be an opportunity to gain a better perspective on some of this stuff, particularly as the ruler of that Jupiter, the Mercury this month, is conjunct that Pluto. So all of that truth to power stuff you were talking about. And I think just the broader Jupiter-Saturn square at the moment is making things really unbalanced, all the polarization that people are talking about. And obviously, I can't imagine what's going to happen when they get to the opposition in another, 4 years time. But right now, we've got this sense of, people are just going from one extreme to the other, it feels like, or flipping from so, the trans people in prison is a perfect example of that. There are people who are up in arms about these trans people going into prison who are rapists, and that all being bad. So now we're going to go to the totally opposite extreme of just like every trans person in prison is going to be treated like a pariah, and there's a total lack of nuance at the moment, which is pervasive in the culture. And I think it speaks a lot to those things. But this month, I think there's some optimism to be had in that I think it's going to open up the perspective of people potentially. And maybe on a personal level, this is a good month to think about our own biases. And I don't mean that necessarily in any ideological way. I just mean it in a very general way, because I think this month will reveal some of our own cognitive biases to ourselves by showing us the flip side. What happens if you take your ideological beliefs to the extreme? What happens at the end of that tunnel? Oh, maybe it's not that great, and I think that'll be true from everybody's point of view. So that this could be an interesting month for showing, for revealing some things about how we think collectively.
Brilliant. And you mentioned the word perspective, and of course this is one of the potential treasures of the air signs, is that they can help you have perspective. And you mentioned as well as Jupiter's associated with morality, with ethics, with justice as well, amongst obviously many other things. So there is, like you say, there's some, and hope. Jupiter is hope.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the last thing to come out of Pandora's box, when all the ills of the world came out, the last thing that came out, and the story, this isn't often told in the story, the last thing that came out of Pandora's box.
Well, it was the only thing remaining, wasn't it? After she released despair and terror and all this other stuff into the world, it was that.
Indeed. Well, before we move to formal discussion, I want to say I really love both of you, the how we see the current moment, like from the big picture, the Pluto in Aquarius. Of course, when we prepare for last 2-3 years, when we prepare this Pluto in Aquarius, we see a lot of positive view about the age of Aquarius, this and that. But then slightly, we know Pluto. Pluto is a nice, sweet, fluffy teddy bear. Sorry. And we have to see its growth, and its growth is coming out now with Pluto in Aquarius. So I really like that. And then I was really 100% agree with Marcus is looking in a bigger picture about the planetary cycle between Jupiter and the Saturn, because all among that astrologer, we should focus on that. While Marcus talking about that, I was so curious. I went back to check the first square. The first square was last year in June, 17 degree, where the Saturn is.
Wow.
Oh, fascinating. All right.
This
That's
is
really
the
interesting.
the square, the first square was between 17 degree Gemini and the 17 degree Pisces.
Wow.
How interesting. When was that, Rod?
Okay, let me go back. Let me have a quick look.
Just wondering if there are any other
it
resonances
oh
with
so
where
yeah,
with where
it
this
was
lunation is, for example. You know?
okay. It was 19th of August. Sorry, yeah, 19th of August,
That'd be late Leo
2024.
sun.
Last
Yeah,
year. Yeah.
yeah, last year Sun was a 27 degree
Leo.
Leo.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
Wow.
okay.
what's going
That's
to happen? Because next full moon, the
is at
full
that
moon,
late degree. And that's of course on Trump's Mars and ascendant.
yes,
Mm.
yes.
So
Here
and
we are. Here we
just
are.
before that there was a couple there was
Yeah,
one
sorry.
extra, but no, maybe we'll move on. It's fine.
That's why.
Time.
Okay.
So
You sure? You sure?
yeah. Fine.
Okay. Yeah, so this is the full moon chart on the 12th of February, and the sun moon opposite at 24 degree Leo and the 24 degree Aquarius. Well, this full moon, I mean, if we see that what we just talking about, it was the really trigger that Jupiter Saturn's sun. Jupiter Saturn
Mhm.
square Sun. So it could be very interesting full moon too. And then, I mean, well, what we can see is like this sun moon is kind of broadly square. Oh no, it's not broadly. Very tiny square Uranus. Uranus.
Mm. Mm.
ah
Yeah.
So I can am I allowed to say what we feeling now, what we discuss about all the AI stock market trans issue, or the what do we call diversity issue, are going to more,
oh
what do
yeah,
we
that's
say?
got maximum tension at this point, and
Yeah.
more surprises and more stuff coming out. And I really hate this full moon because it falls. The moon is exactly on my Saturn at this full moon, but I've got a really busy personally beginning of next month. Like I'm crazy busy,
Uh-huh.
so I think I will be just my brain will be melting on this day. So, but for the world, yeah, it looks like it's going to be maximum tension. But I mean, there is, I suppose, the only saving grace is that Jupiter is at least in a whole sign, trine and sextile. And Jupiter's just gone direct, hasn't it? So there might be a little bit of sanity preservation through civilized discussion going along on the side, but it does look like there will be some very tense conversations and more shocks about technology. That's the Mercury
Yeah.
Uranus thing there. And the fact that Mercury's combust at this full moon from a traditional point of view would mean that a lot of stuff to do with technology or perhaps the financial markets, because they're all run electronically these days, will be very volatile, and people will not be able to see them clearly, and they won't be. It'll feel like a lot of those things. There are a lot of things that are sort of not because a planet that's combust traditionally is very weak, volatile, and can't see or be seen. So there's a sense in which at this full moon, like even though everything's like all these shocking stuff that is out on the table, there's a lot of stuff to do with tech and with the financial markets. That is all of those three things: volatile, can't not clearly visible, and whatever the other one I said was. So those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mandy?
I see a lot of tension and frustration in this chart as well. Uranus, of course, as you've spoken eloquently about the Uranus, which is the apex of that T-square for the full moon. So we're certainly going to be frustrated. It's a fixed T-square, which in itself, it's a fixed T-square. It's more difficult to get going with a fixed T-square. But once a fixed T-square, once things get going under a fixed T-square, it's hard to say, isn't it? Fixed T-square, especially
I think it's the energy of a
fixed T-square. It's almost like it's hard to put the brakes on once it starts. So I think the message there is, because Uranus is incredibly reactive. So if there's a reaction, there could be a chain reaction that it's difficult to stop. I was listening to the radio last night when I was doing the washing up, like you do, and someone said, "I'm not saying, please don't anyone take this, that I'm saying there's going to be a war. I'm not saying this, but I think it's an interesting analogy. Wars are easier to start than they are to stop. Whether that's a war of words, a row, a grudge, because we've got that Mercury combust to the sun. The other thing I think that might play into that is we've got Mars. We've already talked about this Mars in Cancer. Mars in Cancer is a Mars that's slower to act, but when it does act, again, it might get caught up in it. And it's in a trine here to Saturn in Pisces. So there's maybe that block to act, that block or that delay to acting might be useful because it is a trine. It might sort of stop or block some of the worst of the reaction, because there's a lot of touchiness, moodiness, emotional tenderness in this chart as well, where we might become collectively or individually or personally very easily touchy, easily offended. And again, that's something to sort of bear in mind. We don't necessarily want to start a fight under this full moon, and the full moon does tend to bring out a lot of energy and a lot more get up and go than the new moon that we were looked at. The new moon, don't forget, we can always take the context of the new moon. We talked a lot about the new moon just earlier, sets the tone of the energy for the month ahead, which comes to a head at this full moon. So think about what we said before and along with what we're all saying now.
Yeah, I'm really curious. I 100% agree with Mandy talking about this kind of this shocking and kind of a difficult to change that Uranus and form a T-square with the sun and moon. But I'm very curious about Marcus' view about this formula, especially with that Mars-Saturn trine, both malefic.
Yes.
And when they try to each other, I'm really curious what Marcus could, how could we expect? But I'm curious, I have to explain to everyone. I just realized this Mars has a mark as a stationary.
Stationing,
it's not
direct.
Not yet. I think Mars is changing direction on the 24th. So it's too early. But I think this may be
but it does say stationing there, Rod. Is it not stationary?
Yeah, it's not stationary because I think it's my calculation setting set to what should I say?
Okay, it's a little bit soon. It
Yeah.
puts it there a little bit. So is it still? Does it move back to 16 degrees, or is it going to stay in 17 degrees?
I think 17 degrees. Well,
fine.
So
okay.
It's back to 17 degrees. So borderline speaking, you can consider it stationary.
Right.
Some astrology will do that.
Right. Okay.
Incredibly slow, we can agree. Just incredibly,
for sure. So
slow.
it's still retrograde here. So that's interesting. So it's still going the wrong way, because at least when Mars stations direct, there's still going to be this sense of emotional unrest. And, people are going to be on a collective level. I see that Mars in Cancer is people misdirecting their aggression, basically. And because their aggression coming out in the wrong ways at the wrong times towards the wrong people getting very clannish, people getting very, it's a mafia Mars, like I've said before. It's like, you come after my family and we'll leave a horse's head in your bed. But it's all like, it's just misdirected aggression. And on a personal level, of course, you can use these planets very differently, but on a collective level, you tend to see both the best and the very worst expressions of a planet. On an individual chart, these things can be steered a bit differently. But so anyway, so I think, that Mars is still retrograde, trining Saturn. I would need to see where the initial conjunction was between Mars and Saturn, because again, this is part of a cycle. And traditionally, you would look at the Mars-Saturn conjunction cycle, which I think is also a 20-year cycle. It's 3 years. I can't remember. I can't remember how long that cycle is, actually. It's one of the again, this is because I don't really do mundane astrology, but we look at the Jupiter-Saturn cycle as controlling the greater sort of developments in culture, because those can be scaled up to 20 years, and then every 200 and odd years, and then every 900 something years or whatever. So you've got these big cycles. The Mars-Saturn cycle is often looked at for wars and plagues and famines and stuff, all the stuff that makes living on the planet a little bit more tricky, shall we say. So this Mars-Saturn trine, just looking at it in isolation, because I don't know where the original conjunction was or what it's speaking to, because I haven't researched it. I agree with what you were saying, Mandy, about this is going to, because Mars is still retrograde at this time, it's sort of like a damming up of frustration. It's a quiet buildup of frustration here that might leak or explode at unpropitious times. Because even though it's a trine, so there's a potentially constructive side to this, where you could maybe get things done. That Mars is still retrograde and it's still struggling in Cancer. So yes, there is on an individual level, at this full, I wouldn't do anything at this full moon, because on an individual level it's just too volatile. But just maybe take a chill pill, really, just like meditate or whatever. Or if you're don't take any sudden actions around this full moon, is what I'd say, really. But it on the broader scale, that Mars Saturn trine can give some emotional discipline. So because it's a trine, it does have that positive potential. So if you are feeling enraged or frustrated, just use that Mars Saturn trine to stay quiet a little bit longer and mull things over a little bit longer, and don't let things out of the bag immediately, because Mars in Cancer is going to want to do that. It's going to feel some kind of way, and then it'll hold on to it for a while, as Mandy was saying, and then it'll just pop and it'll come out all the wrong ways if you do that. So what this trine does allow is, yes, Saturn's slowing Mars down and damming it up, but it does allow for a little bit of emotional discipline. So, okay, I'm feeling frustrated, I'm feeling upset, I'm feeling, some kind of way about what's going on right now, whether that be in the world or in your life, whatever, either way, just stay quiet for a bit. Just be quiet, keep it calm, keep it shut it, leave it a little bit, because if you do that, that Mars is going to eventually turn direct and start moving around, and you're going to be able to start pushing on those emotional barriers and make a bit more of a less impulsive and potentially destructive decision. That would be so that's the positive potential of that trine. But to what it more broadly means, Rod, I'd need to research that, because I'd want to go back and look at the initial conjunction.
Yeah, while you're talking, I did quick research. So Mars Saturn cycle is every 2 years.
Thank you.
2 years, yes.
Okay, 2 years.
So previous one was happened in 2024. I think it's April 2024. And guess what degree? Oh my God.
Go on.
14 Pisces.
Wow.
Okay.
14 Pisces. Okay, listen. 14 Pisces was the point of Jupiter-Saturn square, the second one.
There we go.
Just
okay.
before Christmas.
Right.
So 2 Saturn-Jupiter square, one at 17 degree Pisces Gemini. That was the first hit in August. Yeah.
Okay.
And the second one was Jupiter-Saturn square in 14 degree Pisces Gemini. So the 14 degree Pisces is a hot spot now. You have Saturn, Mars Saturn conjunction.
And all this, yeah, this totally makes sense because of all the stuff about immigration and the vacuum of compassion that people have at the moment, which is very Saturn in Pisces. It's almost like compassion fatigue, or no, I'm not going to feel that. I'm not feeling that anymore. You know, and I think that speaks to all the stuff about both refugees. But I'm not talking. I don't think this is just the fact that we have more, you know, hardcore nationalist right-wing ideologies popping up. I also feel this is true of people on both sides of the political aisle, so to speak, because, you know, people are just like, no, I'm not going to see it from your point of view. I'm not going to see it from your point of view. Your point of view sucks. It's disgusting. That's a very Saturn in Pisces vibe, potentially the most negative, you know. So with that Mars conjunct Saturn in Pisces beginning it makes sense that there's that, you know, this is so. But I do think this trine has a positive potential, which is at least it might give people the ability on an individual level just to restrain themselves from exploding and leaking toxic material everywhere at this full moon. And I'm speaking to myself here as a Mars in Cancer native. So this moon is going to be right on my Saturn, and Mars is very close to opposing my natal Pluto at this full moon, and squaring my sun and opposing my moon. So yeah, this is going to be an interesting one for me.
Oh, bless you. But I mean, I mean, you have the intellectual and emotional awareness, and that's what you're talking to, you know, help people that are watching this. And as you were talking, Marcus, and you're so eloquent in the way that you explain things, but as you were talking, I was thinking about the sign of Cancer and Mars in Cancer, and I mentioned earlier about sort of grudges and the fixed signs and the grudges, and, you know, with some of the other astrology, with the full moon astrology. But Cancer also can live in the past as well, and it's memory the past and thinking about the past. And we haven't mentioned that, you know, as well as Saturn, there's an ongoing square between Mars in Cancer and Chiron in Aries. So again, that speaks into old wounds. It's almost like as if old wounds could feel like they're being opened up, things from the past. So that's again something to really reflect upon and think about, and maybe get some sort of help and assistance with, if you feel, you know, is this something old? Very often whenever we are upset, offended or hurt or frustrated, or we act out, it's very often it comes from stuff that's happened.
100. Yeah, it's like what if it's hysterical, it's historical is the one I've heard.
That's a good,
I really like.
Good way to say it.
I love that, Mandy, because it's retrograde as well, isn't it, Mars?
Retrograde as well, yeah. And because it's obviously Chiron, it's going to hurt. It might feel more hurtful than it needs to, or more hurtful than it really is. And because, as you said, it's out of bounds, it's also going to feel perhaps bigger than it actually is. And I always think this too shall pass. This Mars Chiron, Mars Saturn is not going to last forever. This full moon is going to be over in a jiffy. So just hang on in there.
Yeah, exactly. No, thank you, man. That's great. I love that. And yet I think anything to do with Cancer, anything in Cancer is cyclical. There's a sense of cyclicity. So it's not like Mars in a fixed sign might hold on to its anger in that way. But I definitely agree, Mandy, that what happens with Mars in Cancer when it's being dysfunctional is it will dredge stuff up, like emotional issues from an argument you had 10 years ago, because there's a sense of like repetition. And I know myself as a Mars in Cancer native, often and this is true of lots of us, you know, but then I think often, you know, I might get upset by something and I might not realize necessarily that I'm upset in the moment. And then it'll come back later and I'll get like little waves of like, you know, really feeling angry about it. And then I'll be fine. And then it'll come back and then I'll be fine. And then it'll come back and then I'll be fine. And it's like, even just doing jobs, I have to feel good to get something done. So it's sort of like you have to build up a head of steam to do a job, where I find that somebody like you, Rod, the Mars in Capricorn native, just does it, whatever they feel like. They've got a cold, they'll just do the job, they'll just do it. And Mars in Cancer, I'm like, oh, I don't feel like it, and it takes you ages to get it done. but we sort of like do everything. So this came really clear to me. This is all a bit of a Mars in Cancer tirade, but it's relevant because it's just retrograde at the moment, and then it's going to go direct. And I think a lot of people's volatility at the moment is, and in the world generally, like even the fires out of control in LA, and like just everything being a bit more volatile than usual is very related to it. So on a behavioral level, I noticed that just when I'm go climbing, there's a friend of mine who has Mars in Scorpio and I have Mars in Cancer. And he would just like, he couldn't do a climb. He'd just throw himself at the wall and stick to that climb until he'd done it. Like he'd be at that same climb for like an hour and just keep forcing himself at the wall until he'd done it. I mean, within reason. Sometimes we'd like, okay, let's give it a rest for this week. You've tried that enough times. But whereas with me, I'll give a climb a go once or twice. And if I'm like, no, I can't do that this week, but I'll keep coming back to it every week. And it's sort of got this cyclical sideways thing to it. So all of that to say that I think I really agree with your reading of that there, Mandy, and your advice. But I do think this trine, at least to Saturn, has some constructive potential right now. It's not a square to Saturn, so at least there's that. There's a trine, so there is that. You can, emotionally speaking, contain the tantrum a little bit. You know, you don't have to. You don't have to let it out the bag right now. You can contain it a little bit. Use a little bit of discipline. Let the moment pass. Let Mars go direct. And then you can find some more constructive outlets for those frustrations, hopefully.
Have a good cry if you need to.
Yeah. Let it out, but let it out in a way where you're not going to be lashing out.
Yeah. Well, before we finish, I want to say thank you to Marcus and Mandy bring us this very, very in-depth discussion from the global mountain level to the personal level. Basically, even myself, I feel really helpful because, well, this morning when I read like Monday, when I read that news about what Trump blamed on the diversity, to be honest, I was like, thank God that I took a blood pressure pill because I was feel like, what? Anyway, but to be honest, because this is not one case, it's coming through and it will continuing. And I would just remember that we are going to facing a few retrograde. The first, I think, Mars was stationary this moment, and then around March, I think around March we have two planets. I just give a quick preview. Around March we have a Venus going to retrograde from the 2nd of March, and then the Mercury is going to retrograde from I think 15th of March. That are going to be interesting months, and we will come back next month when we talk about transit. We will go through that, especially even when we talk about the new moon, full moon. But I think we were still talking about those two personal planets going to retrograde nearly one after another. That would be so interesting. But thank you for joining us. Thank you, Mandy. Thank you, Max, and thanks everyone who joined us today. I really hope you can, enjoy this new moon and remember what Marcus say. This one should pass, hold that anger and contain it and wait until it passes. Okay. Thanks everyone. And see you next month. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.